I worried about it. They want dogs, even worse. She had Hey. She would just take her sick. It's not easier. It's not easier for you. For anyone else. Oh, you've got something at school. Should it be easier at school than having it at home? No, because you.
No, that's she said. My mum was very much like, unless you die and you go to school. Well, my mum's a human nurse, so she knows it. And she was like, I'm really unwell, and she was like, nah, you're not going to work. And then I think after an hour and a half, the school nurse phoned her and was like, so your daughter has literally just projectile vomited all on. Can you come pick her up now? I was like, because again, normally. Okay, so let's go through the dietary requirements then. And what I would suggest is a little hint of hint. Looking at your learning outcomes for the exams, for application, we're focusing, one of the learning outcomes is fluid therapy and nutrition. Oh. Okay. So make sure when you're doing revision, obviously learn everything, but the key thing, because that's the learning outcome assessing you on, just be prepared that dietary and fluids is going to be an exam question. So I would, whenever we talk about dietary considerations, make sure you write them down and highlight them. So with our kidney patients, what we're trying to do really is, as I say, we can't cure the cat and we can't stop the deterioration, but what we can do is we can slow the disease progression. And one of the biggest things, as we already said, that's a concern is azotemia. So if our patients have a high level of circulating urea, we've said that urea is corrosive. So what we can do, in order to slow that down, if we can remove the amount of urea that's circulating, then hopefully that will mean, whilst it's not going to delay the disease as such, it will helpfully slow the progression. So with our dietary focuses initially for our cat, that's what we're thinking about. Is how can we limit the amount of urea? And if we can't limit urea, how best can we manage the waste products that we're getting from that protein? Now, having said that, the first thing, which is crucial, is making sure that our patient's hydrated. And this, again, because cats are weird and wonderful, this is a bit we might need to be a little bit creative. So owners may find that they need to get things like a water fountain, they might need to start putting water in strange places, but equally if you've got owners that say, oh, the cat drinks out the tap, great, put the tap on. The other one I've heard of before was an owner that she said, oh, my cat's got this really weird habit of licking the bath after the shower, and normally that's panes. Window panes. My daughter's cat licks panes, so normally that would be a bit of a faux pas, wouldn't it? Be like, don't do that. With kidney cats, just embrace it. Like if they need to go in the shower and drink water in the shower, then so be it. Because they need to have that water, and that's the thing that's keeping that's important, is keeping that hydration. Now, in terms of energy, one of the things we find with a lot of diseases, and not specifically just kidney cats, is they have a problem known as cachexia. And I know we've mentioned this before. I feel like we've mentioned it before. Guys online, let me just type it in the chat for you. The spelling.
Katie said she's just ROC override.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's all right. Yeah, she broke. Oh no! I thought she texted me like, I said, yeah. So cachexia then is basically where reason why it can affect lots of different diseases. What it basically means is where the disease itself increases the nutritional demands of the animal. Now, with cachexia, the challenge is that the body will naturally go for what's most readily available, and then it will go for what's easiest to break down. So we know normally that we will use glucose, so our body will use our carbohydrates. If carbohydrate isn't available, it will then use protein, and if that's not available, it then use fat. So with our kidney cats, they naturally have, because of the body trying to keep that metabolism going, trying to keep blood flow, trying to function the kidneys correctly, we find that their energy demands are much, much higher. So what we want to do is make sure that we give them ample energy, because otherwise they will go into a state of cachexia. And specifically, what we want to prevent is the breakdown of protein. Yes. Oh, I was putting my hand up. I was like, now, the reason why protein particularly is a concern is urea is produced by the breakdown of protein. So if our cat is in a state of hyper energy requirement, and we've already got lots of urea, the last thing we want them to do is to start breaking down their own protein supplies, because that's then going to increase the urea again. The other reason why we want to make sure their energy is up is because they will struggle with weight loss energy. They will struggle with weight loss anyway. So we said that weight loss is a clinical science, so we need to make sure they're being fed ample so that they can keep their energy up, so that their body doesn't start using anything else in the cachexia, but equally want to maintain their body weight. Now, having said that, whilst I've said we want to give them ample energy, what we don't want to do is bombard them with protein. Because if we bombard them with protein, we're going to give them basically another load of urea to process. So with our kidney patients specifically, this is really, really important. So we give them protein. It's not that we're taking protein away, because if we take protein away, the body will just go, hang on a second, I need protein, let's go get the lean muscle, let's start breaking it down. We don't want it to do that. We don't want it to go into this keto state, but what we need to make sure we do is the protein that we give them needs to be high biological value. The reason why high biological value protein is so important is because it's more refined. It's got less waste associated with it. So it'd be the difference of, for example, eating one of those horrendous double Big Macs that everyone's advertising at the moment versus a chicken. Yeah, double. It's like this big. I don't know how you eat it. A double Big Mac versus like a chicken breast. So the double Big Mac, whilst it's protein, there's all that kind of cack in it. That means that technical term. Yeah, medical term. But there's all that extra stuff in there that's going to end up producing more waste products. Whereas our chicken breast, because it's refined protein, the body is going to use it much more efficiently. So it's not going to have that risk of producing lots and lots of waste in response. So we do want protein, but it needs to be high biological value.
Jo, with that, with a lot of like your Royal Canin renal foods and stuff, the ingredients are usually like the meat and animal derivatives, which have a lower biological value. So why do they add that instead of like your kind of higher meat content foods that have like actual like deboned chicken breast and things in it?
Yeah, basically because it's cheaper.
So, but is it not necessarily better for the cat then?
So it's lower. So it's meat derivatives. So it will be calculated to have less waste in there.
Yeah.
But it's seen to be. The reason why we do it is because for some kidney cats, their digestive process is also poorer. So the idea is if you give them derivatives, it doesn't take as much energy to do it. Yeah, go for it.
That face I'm like, what's she doing? These insect diets that are coming out now and then, would they be any good for kidney cats? Because the proteins that they in them, insect proteins, synthesize any of the other proteins.
Potentially, I mean, I haven't done much research into it.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, but potentially, if it's biologically active or biologically accessible protein, then potentially it could be a good.
But even synthesized, obviously, bugs don't have all the proteins required, so then they synthesize it. Is that still okay?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, it's interesting actually. It's a good point. Yeah, absolutely. Now, the other bits is to do with the waste products. So what we're looking here is the rest of the kidney's ability to filter. So phosphorus is a really fun one, because what phosphorus does is basically we want our body to be able to excrete phosphorus. That's the key thing. So phosphorus again is produced when protein is broken down, and what we find is that if we've got too much phosphorus, calcium and phosphorus switch over each other. So they've got that interchange. So if my body is excreting phosphorus, what's going to happen with my calcium?
Increase.
It's going to increase. It's going to stay in circulation. So if I then find that I increase my calcium, I cause my patient to become hypercalcemic. Now, the other thing we find is that in response to calcium, the parathyroid glands that sit just below the thyroids, they produce, they'll produce something to store calcium. So what we can find is we can actually make our parathyroid work too hard in response to the calcium. So this is why phosphorus is beneficial, because actually we want to make sure that the calcium is being, the phosphorus is being excreted to keep that balancing. Because if we find if there's too much phosphorus in circulation, the calcium goes out. But if there's too much phosphorus being excreted the other way, then we find our patient becomes hypercalcemic. Make sense? Yeah.
I just read that calcium, you know, when you put
Yeah.
the reduced phosphorus can normalise the crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
It's that ratio.
It's
No, it's like, that's why I tend to talk through my slides, because I'm like, I put it in short term and I'm like, doesn't make sense. Sodium's another one. So we know that sodium and water move opposite each other. So if we can help to reduce our sodium, then it stops our fluid being pushed out of our kidneys. Our kidneys already been pushing out because they can't filter. But again, if we lower salt, that can be beneficial. And then potassium supplement, this is just if we find that we have a reduction. So who's, do you guys know this? So what does, so, actually I'll give the answer. So sodium and potassium work opposite each other. So again, if our sodium is high, then our potassium will be pushed out with our water. So again, that's why we want to keep our sodium down, get rid of our sodium, because our potassium tends to move with water as well. So if our potassium is being excreted and our water is being excreted because our sodium is high, then our patients will have low potassium. Does anyone know what happens if our patients have too little potassium?
it affects cardiac.
It does, yeah, it causes arrhythmias, like quite significant arrhythmias. So we obviously don't want to cause our cats to have arrhythmia problems. So again, it's that those kind of ratios are swapping between them. So keeping sodium down, because sodium and water will work opposite each other, but equally potassium and water also tend to work together. So if our animal is unable to retain water in circulation, it's naturally going to be pushing out the potassium as well. But a deficit in potassium, as Millie said, has significant cardiac abnormalities, or can cause significant cardiac abnormalities. So to make sure that everyone's working nicely together, we might need to supplement. That makes sense?
So they're really,
Yeah.
like so many.
Yeah, they can with the kidney cats. Yeah, they're all over the place. The last bits then, so this is to do with the wider function of protein more than anything else. So we might find that we need to, the last one, the first one's slightly different. So erythropoietin is basically, if our animals have lack of protein, we also might find they become anemic because they can't produce the red blood cells that is required because we don't have the protein. So what we can give them is erythropoietin, which basically will encourage the body to produce red blood cells in the bone marrow rather than the normal method. And then with our B vitamins are water soluble. So if our cats are peeing more, if the vitamins are being dissolved into that water and they're peeing, it's being expelled from the body. So again, we might find that the B vitamins need to be supplemented because they're naturally going to be forced out more than because the kidneys aren't functioning correctly. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on then to our digestive system. And I say we'll come back to this next time if Paula said her old cat had kidney disease and the vet gave him benzopril and a high omega fatty acid diet and gave him a good extra 5 years. It was crazy. Yes, good example. So benzopril is our ACE inhibitor. And the omega fatty acids, that's a fun one. Because what they think with omega fatty acids is it's also it's good for removing what are called free radicals. So free radicals are produced when the muscle is put under stress. So or they're released when lean protein is broken down. So what the free radicals do is that they can actually, again, poison the cat. So all this was saying, the omega-3 was given, and that basically helps to absorb all of those things. But yeah, kidney cats are fun because they're just always different. Hopefully the digestive system will be a bit more straightforward. So similar to our kidneys, bear in mind with our digestive system, as you guys know very well, we've got lots of different organs that make it up. Now the challenge with the digestive system, in a similar kind of way to the kidneys, is they are naturally connected to each other. So if you've got a problem associated with the stomach, it's then going to have a knock-on effect with either the esophagus or the intestines that follows, because they're attached to each other. So with our dysfunctions or our kind of clinical signs, they all tend to be similar. Now there are minor differences between them, and we'll come on to what those are. But things like vomiting, diarrhea, regurgitation, for example, it's because they're all sequential that you can have an effect in the stomach that may cause the same things. So just to remind you then of your terminology, excuse me, again. Okay. So with all of our GI patients, these are common clinical signs that we'll see. So first one is our dysphagia. So we know that the prefix dys is difficulty, and hopefully you're happy that phagia is the suffix for swallowing, so difficulty swallowing. Inappetence and anorexia, just be careful how you use them, because inappetence basically means a lack of appetite, but the animal is still keen to eat something, whereas anorexia is a complete lack of appetite or a choice not to eat. Now, with our anorexia in animals, it's not that we're suspecting they all have eating disorders, but there is something clinically that is putting them off or giving them an aversion to eating. Now, it might be that, like with our kidney cat, that they are feeling nauseous. So therefore, that is enough of a motivator for them to not want to eat. So they develop an aversion. It could be that, say, for example, with our rabbit, if we've got dental problems and that eating, the actual act of eating is really painful and uncomfortable, that's going to, again, they're choosing not to eat because when they do, it hurts them. So that would still be anorexia. So it's where there's something going on that's promoting them to have a complete lack of appetite or a choice not to eat. Whereas inappetence is just a partial. And sometimes when the way you can kind of tell the difference, and I often do this with Moo at home, is if they are hungry, but they're not feeling very well, you can often persuade them to eat with something completely random. So if Moo is happy to eat, for example, I had fun yesterday. I was a really bad owner. She was eating Doritos yesterday. It's just so funny. She had like 3. I say she was eating them. She had 3 Doritos. Just because a collie eating Doritos is a funny thing ever. If you can get them to, like in practice, if you can get them to eat tuna, chicken, what's another one we do? Pilchards and tomato sauce, which is disgusting. My nice cardiac patient that he was on Big Macs, that shows inappetence because he's still eating. He's just showing preferences for other things. If they've gone to full-blown anorexia, they won't eat anything. So you can't persuade them. Even if you warm it up and make it smell delicious, they're still not prepared to eat. So just be careful with how you use it. Polyphagia is then the opposite, so increased eating or excessive ingestion. And with your excessive ingestion, it's always worth asking yourself the question of what is it or why is it? So, if you've got an animal that's ravenous because they haven't been eating, then they are going to be polyphagic, of course they are. But you might find if they're eating certain things or if they're choosing to eat certain things, it might not simply be a case of hunger. So, you might have an animal that suddenly starts craving a particular nutrient, or cats, for example, will often stress eat. So suddenly you've got a cat that is eating excessively. The question there is, okay, what's caused it? So, whereas take that stage further. Whereas the next stage then is pica. And pica, again, it is this craving unnatural food articles, but again, there tends to be a reason behind it. And what I would say with pica is animals can be incredibly secretive about this. So we had a spaniel in practice several years ago who came in with constipation. And it turned out the reason she had constipation is because she had been snaffling carpet. So the owner had an old roll of carpet in the garage, and for whatever reason she kept going and having it and finding and eating the carpet. Turns out she had a nutritional deficiency, and for whatever reason the carpet was providing that's whatever she wanted. But as I said, the owner was completely unaware, because she'd go off in the garden, end up in the shed, have a little chew on the carpet, and it was only after kind of 2-3 weeks she stopped pooing because she blocked herself up. We were like, she's literally got carpet in her stomach, and they were like, has she? I can't see that. So with pica it sometimes can be weird and wonderful, but equally things like just stone obsessions, for example, or you get like cats will eat like the first, not the first, like in the wall sucking and things like that, would still be pica.
Animals ever get pica? Because pica's really common.
Yeah.
Not really common, but it's when it tends to happen.
Yeah.
With adult. Does that? Do you know?
It doesn't happen in the same way.
No.
It can happen if there's a nutritional deficiency. You tend to see pica more when there's an endocrine change. So often hormones will make them.
My friend literally ate chalk.
Yeah, I remember. To be fair,
She always
when
she's completely normal. Like,
yeah.
You know, she's not.
Crazy chalk person.
No, she just
Help it. Like,
she couldn't help
No,
it.
we had this shows how old I am, but when I was at secondary school, we still had whiteboards, and I remember there was a sign.
Dude, I had a blackboard.
Yeah. That's what I mean, blackboard. That's what I mean.
Oh, okay.
A blackboard. Whiteboard. No, blackboard is what I mean. But one of our science teachers, when she was pregnant, she was on chalk, and she'd literally be like writing on the board, and then she was pregnant. She just had this like things or something. Anyway. But yeah, having this like
chalk.
That was like my favourite.
I mean, the body wants.
What should I know?
oh, what better?
I'm gonna.
Especially doing with lessons.
Yeah. Oh,
no, so weird.
Oh, I can't.
Yeah.
That's pretty chill. And ice cube.
Yeah, that's like.
I used to freeze.
Okay.
You should.
So with your just slight difference, regurgitation and vomiting are slightly different. So just remember, regurgitation is passive and vomiting is active. Key difference is vomiting, you actually have stomach contraction in order to vomit, whereas regurg, the sphincters all open up and it just comes up. So again, hopefully you're happy. Have you come across tenesmus before? Yeah. Cool. So again, our objectives. So I've just chucked this in here because this is really helpful. This is the Bristol stool chart. And whilst it is talking about poo and it's given descriptions to poo, again, it's just something else you can incorporate. Now these, I like this one. Yeah, this is my personal favourite description. Sausage-like or sausage or snake-like, smooth and soft. But again, it takes something that is really descriptive, and in some ways, like owners don't like talking about feces because it's a bit weird. But if you can kind of give them this and say, where does it fit? But also for your patients that do have diarrhea, again, it's a scale. So if they come in with type 7, if you can get them to like type 5 or type 4, you can see that progression. So yeah, it's quite helpful to have as another kind of method just to monitor. So we do for time. We keep going. We can come back to this next week. So first one then, if we're talking about kind of GI, is megaesophagus. Don't know if people have come across this before. Millie has. So megaesophagus, as the name suggests, is basically an enlarged esophagus. Now, in some ideas, you go, well, what's the problem with an enlarged esophagus? But we know that the esophagus uses its own form of peristalsis to get food to go down. So it's about muscle contraction and about nervous stimulus to get the food down into the stomach. And what you find with megaesophagus is the esophagus itself has really, really poor muscle tone. So it's often described as kind of flaccid or hyperdilated. So it can't keep that tone. So basically what you find is that as the animal swallows, there's nothing to contract to keep it down. So they will naturally regurge and come back up again. Now it can be congenital, so therefore it can also be inherited, but it can also happen after trauma. And you might find that the whole esophagus becomes enlarged or parts of it. So a really fun one is when you get like a bubble in the middle. So you get like some of it goes down and then the fluid gathers and then it reaches the limit and it comes back up again. So there is a predisposition. It's found in German Shepherds. It's found in Newfoundland Irish setters and Siamese cats. But I said the key thing is that peristalsis movement that helps keep the food down isn't there. So the animal will regurge. Okay? So any ideas how we treat this? So there's your diagnostics. So what we do is a contrast study. So we give the animal some food with something like barium in it. Barium, if you haven't done, you can dazzle firm with this later if you haven't done contrast. But barium is radio opaque. And there's different formulations we can use. We can use a powder that we mix into the food, which is my preference, because the other option is a liquid, and then you just get covered in barium, and it literally looks like white toothpaste. But what it will do is it will coat the esophagus, and you can then see where the food is going. So if you have got megaesophagus, the esophagus will appear hyperopaque, and then you can see the shape. So you can see where there's the enlargement.
For the breeds and specific ones, is it as a puppy, or would it be more that they were fine as a puppy then?
It depends on the individual. So some of them, from a pup, you'll see it, and then sometimes it's as they grow, like the bigger they get, the more obvious it is they've got poor muscle tone. So it does depend. And you can do endoscopes as well to see where it is and how it is. So any ideas what we can do with these guys for treatment?
Be patient.
Be patient. Yeah, exactly. So this is much more. Here you go. Should I explain with the barium? This is much more a management issue than a clinical cure. So there you go, a little baby chair. So what we're doing in these ones is we're thinking about how we're feeding them. So Millie said be patient, and that's a really important thing. Not giving them too much food, allowing them to swallow the food that they have. But the other thing that we can use, which is very much our best friend, is gravity. So if we feed the animals from a height, basically what we're encouraging the food to do is to go down using gravity, and then we're hoping that when it gets into the stomach, the pyloric sphincter will close. Oh, sorry, the cardiac sphincter. That's on top, isn't it? Cardiac sphincter will close. So then we won't get that regurg. Now, I have put a video up on Ledge for you because people train themselves to get in. Because they've done really wonderful things. So you can literally have like a ladder system, feed the dog up on the height, it's absolutely fine. But these kind of feeding chairs are becoming more and more commonplace. Now, as you can see here, it's a box with a piece of tube. It's nothing very exciting. But what they've trained a lot of the dogs to do is you literally train them to walk backwards. They sit in their chair, they have their food, stay there for about 5-10 minutes, and then walk out.
So this is a dash hound that I know. This is Doris, who's she's actually Sarah's got 3.
My gosh.
I'll share the link. Of them so that they don't.
Yeah.
And it really keeps them quiet.
That's very cute.
They stay in there for about half an hour at a time.
Yeah.
Once they've eaten.
Yeah, so you keep them up in that position.
Yeah.
Which is good because remember the stomach is functioning normally.
Yeah.
It's just that the food needs to stay in contact.
It looks like it inflates.
Yeah.
Doris's kind of.
Yeah, because the muscle tone's gone, so there's nothing keeping it into
really,
shape.
it looks like when a dog kind of puffs.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very bizarre. The other thing you can do as well is use semi-liquid food. So again, because it takes less effort for it to go down. So that's quite a nice one. And you can do surgery. So in some patients you can do like a tie back. Sorry, not a tie back, like a reconstruction where you almost like pull it in. But again, depending on what's caused it, that's not really going to be a solution. So you might find it deteriorates again. It might be a neurological problem. So as I say, most times we're doing a management more than anything else. Okay, I think we'll leave it there. We've got a couple more bits to touch on, but we can do that next week. Has anyone got any questions at all?
Apart from, do you think there's, that you could maybe say whether you want to do our pharmacology? You know you want to.
Yeah. Oh, your phone. Oh, yeah. Well,
I'm really worried about it.
Yeah. So the honest answer is, I need to have a chat with Matthew. I've written down some possible solutions. If I do it, there's going to have to be some major timetable swaps. But I think we stop recording a second. I think Emma's keen for me to do it. Oh my